Ancient Egyptian priest. If you wanted to become a priest in ancient Egypt, you needed the right family. Most priests were born into the job. Your father was a priest. Now you are one too. The pharaoh technically owns every temple, but in reality, the high priest of Amun runs the show. People bow to you in the street. They believe you speak to the gods directly. That respect feels amazing at first. Your job is to care for a statue, not preach, not teach crowds. Just care for the god's physical body, hidden inside the temple. Every morning you wash it, you dress it, you offer it food. Then you seal the doors again. Ordinary people never even see the statue. Only you do. You wear white linen. You shave your entire body, every 3 days, including your head. Lice and dirt offend the gods. You bathe multiple times a day in sacred pools. It sounds relaxing. It is not. Missing a single ritual step is considered dangerous, not just embarrassing. Temples like Karnak stretch for miles. You could work there your whole life and never see every room. Festivals like Opet involve dragging massive statues through packed streets in brutal heat, wearing full ceremonial dress. However, here is the problem. One wrong word during a ritual, and priests believed the temple could lose divine protection. Pharaohs like Akhenaten once tried banning your gods entirely, replacing them with one sun disk. Priesthoods lost their income overnight. Your temple, your job, your whole life, gone with one royal decree. Eventually, temples grew so wealthy that priests controlled more land than some nobles. That made you a political target. Rulers feared you. Enemies plotted against you. Being close to the gods also meant being close to danger. Mesopotamian priest. In ancient Mesopotamia, you do not choose this life either. Priesthood often passes through families, especially for the top ranks, but some roles are chosen through omens. A dream, a strange bird flight, a mark on an animal's liver. The gods, priests believed, pick you through signs like these. Your temple is called a ziggurat, a giant stepped tower reaching toward the sky. Cities like Ur and Babylon built these as the literal home of their patron god. You live and work inside this complex, which functions like a small city itself, with storerooms, workshops, and farmland attached. Your day starts before sunrise. You wash yourself in consecrated water. You recite prayers in Sumerian, a language most ordinary people no longer even speak. You burn incense. You examine sheep livers to predict the future for kings preparing for war. Meanwhile, you also manage grain storage, loans, and temple workers. Religion and economics are the same job here. You are basically a priest, an accountant, and a government official combined. Unfortunately, that combination creates enormous pressure. If the harvest fails, people blame you. If a king loses a battle after you gave a favorable omen, your life could be at risk. Kings like Hammurabi expected precise religious guidance before major decisions. Even worse, mistakes during rituals were seen as catastrophic. A wrong word during an incantation could supposedly anger a god enough to unleash plague or flood. You carry that fear constantly. Still, some perks exist. Temple priests eat well, live comfortably, and gain real influence. But independence is rare. You always answer to someone, whether a high priest or the king himself. Greek priest. In ancient Greece, becoming a priest works differently. Sometimes you inherit the role. Sometimes a city simply elects you. Sometimes, especially for the famous oracle at Delphi, you are chosen because you fit a specific requirement, like being an older woman from the local area. There is no single path here. You do not run the religion. Greece has no central church, no single holy book. Instead, you manage one specific temple, dedicated to one specific god. You might serve Athena in Athens, or Apollo in Delphi. Your authority stays local, tied to that one sanctuary. Daily life revolves around sacrifice. You slaughter animals, burn portions for the gods, and share the rest with worshippers. You oversee purification rituals, using water, salt, and smoke to cleanse people before they enter sacred ground. Festivals like the Panathenea in Athens require weeks of preparation, processions, and competitions. At Delphi, the role becomes stranger. The oracle, called the Pythia, sits above a rocky chasm, breathes strange vapors, and speaks in riddles believed to come from Apollo himself. Kings and generals travel great distances just to hear her cryptic answers before starting wars. However, that fame brings danger. Misinterpreting an oracle could get you blamed for a military disaster. Politicians constantly try to bribe or manipulate priests for favorable prophecies. Your reputation for honesty is your only real protection. Unfortunately, you also earn no fixed salary. Temples survive on donations and state funding, which can dry up during wartime. Meanwhile, philosophers like Socrates openly question whether gods even care about your rituals at all, chipping away at public respect. Eventually, Christianity arrives, and your entire religious system gets outlawed within a few centuries. Everything you built becomes forbidden practically overnight. Roman priest. In Rome, priesthood becomes a political career. You do not need special faith or visions. You need connections. Wealthy families buy their sons' positions within priestly colleges. The most powerful priest, the Pontifex Maximus, is often a leading politician too. Julius Caesar himself held that title. Your job blends religion with law and government. You interpret omens before elections. You decide which days are lucky for battles or business. Senators consult you before major decisions. That gives you real power over Roman public life. If you become a Vestal Virgin, your life looks completely different. Chosen as a young girl, you serve 30 years tending Rome's sacred fire. You live comfortably, gain enormous respect, and even get the best seats at gladiator games. However, breaking your vow of chastity as a Vestal carries a horrifying punishment. You could be buried alive. Meanwhile, male priests face different pressures. Political rivals constantly claim that unlucky omens prove your incompetence, especially after military defeats. Ceremonies happen constantly. You sacrifice bulls, sheep, and pigs at temples across the city. You examine their organs for signs. During festivals like Saturnalia, entire cities pause work for days of feasting and rituals you help organize. Unfortunately, emperors eventually demand to be worshipped as gods themselves. Refusing to perform sacrifices to the emperor becomes dangerous, especially once Christians start refusing publicly. You get caught between old traditions and new imperial demands. Eventually, Emperor Constantine converts to Christianity. Within decades, your ancient rituals become illegal. Temples get closed or converted. Centuries of Roman religious tradition collapse within a single generation, leaving old priests jobless and irrelevant almost overnight. Medieval Catholic priest. In medieval Europe, becoming a priest usually starts young. Poor families sometimes send sons to monasteries simply because it guarantees food and education. You study Latin, memorize scripture, and eventually get ordained by a bishop. From that moment, you cannot marry. You cannot own much property. Your entire life belongs to the church. Your village depends on you completely. You baptize babies, marry couples, and bury the dead. You are often the only literate person for miles. People bring you disputes, illnesses, and confessions of sin. That trust gives you enormous influence over daily life. Each morning begins before dawn with prayers. You perform Mass, sometimes multiple times a day. You fast frequently, following strict church calendars. Meanwhile, you manage church finances, collect tithes, and maintain the building itself, which often needs constant repair. Cathedrals like Notre Dame or Canterbury take generations to build. You might spend your entire career watching construction that your grandchildren, if you had any, would never see finished. However, plague changes everything. When the Black Death sweeps through Europe, you are expected to visit the dying, hear final confessions, and bury countless bodies. Many priests die performing these duties. Entire villages lose their clergy within weeks. Even worse, political power creates constant danger. Kings and popes frequently clash over authority, and you get caught in the middle. Priests accused of heresy face trial, excommunication, or worse. The Inquisition later makes even minor theological disagreements potentially fatal. Unfortunately, corruption spreads too. Some clergy sell indulgences, promising forgiveness for payment. That practice eventually angers a monk named Martin Luther enough to challenge the entire church, splitting Christianity permanently. Byzantine Orthodox priest. In the Byzantine Empire, your path looks similar to the Catholic West, but with one major difference. You can marry, as long as it happens before ordination. Once ordained, though, you can never remarry, even if your wife dies. Bishops, on the other hand, must remain unmarried, usually chosen from monasteries instead. Constantinople is your world's religious center, home to the massive church of Hagia Sophia, with its enormous golden dome. Standing inside during a service, surrounded by glowing mosaics and chanting choirs, feels genuinely overwhelming. This is meant to feel like heaven on earth. Your services follow long, elaborate rituals in Greek. You swing incense, chant ancient hymns, and guide worshippers through ceremonies that can last for hours. Icons, painted images of saints, play a central role in your worship, believed to connect people directly to the divine. However, that belief nearly destroys your career entirely. During a period called iconoclasm, emperors ban religious images altogether, calling them idol worship. Priests who refuse to destroy icons face imprisonment, torture, or exile. You could lose everything simply for defending sacred paintings. Meanwhile, the emperor holds massive religious authority, sometimes even choosing the patriarch himself. Unlike the Catholic Pope, your top leader answers directly to imperial power. That makes theological debates deeply political, not just spiritual. Eventually, disagreements with Rome grow too large to ignore. Arguments over authority, rituals, and doctrine cause the Great Schism, splitting Christianity into Catholic and Orthodox branches permanently. Even worse, Constantinople eventually falls to Ottoman forces in 1453. Hagia Sophia, your empire's greatest church, becomes a mosque. Centuries of Byzantine Christian tradition suddenly exist under entirely different rulers. Medieval Islamic imam and scholar. In the medieval Islamic world, you technically are not a priest at all. Islam has no formal priesthood. Instead, you become an imam or scholar through years of studying the Quran, Arabic grammar, and religious law. Anyone with enough knowledge can lead prayer, but true respect comes from deep study. You might study at Baghdad's House of Wisdom, or later at Al-Azhar in Cairo, learning alongside mathematicians, doctors, and astronomers. Religion and science overlap constantly in your world. Many great scholars are simultaneously imams and researchers. Your daily role centers on the mosque. You lead 5 daily prayers, deliver Friday sermons, and teach students memorizing the Quran by heart. You also settle disputes using Islamic law, acting as judge, teacher, and spiritual guide simultaneously. Caliphs and sultans rely on scholars like you for legitimacy. Your approval can strengthen or weaken a ruler's authority. That gives you real influence, but also real danger. Disagree with a powerful caliph, and you risk imprisonment or execution. However, theological disputes get intense. Debates between different schools of Islamic law sometimes turn violent. During certain periods, rulers persecute scholars who refuse to accept state-approved interpretations of theology, imprisoning respected teachers for their opinions. Meanwhile, the Mongol invasion devastates Baghdad in 1258, destroying countless libraries and killing scholars by the thousands. Centuries of accumulated Islamic scholarship burn or sink into the Tigris River within days. Even without that disaster, your job demands constant travel. Scholars often journey across deserts between cities, seeking knowledge from famous teachers, facing bandits, disease, and brutal heat along dangerous trade routes. Hindu priest. In traditional Hindu society, you are born into this role. You belong to the Brahmin caste, meaning priesthood runs through your family for generations. From childhood, you memorize sacred texts called the Vedas, passed down orally for thousands of years before ever being written. Your training is brutal in its precision. You learn exact pronunciation, rhythm, and pitch for chanting Sanskrit verses. A single mispronounced syllable during a ritual, priests believed, could ruin its entire spiritual effect. Memorizing thousands of verses perfectly takes years of relentless practice. You perform daily rituals called puja, offering food, flowers, and incense to deities inside temples or household shrines. You guide major life ceremonies too, including births, weddings, and funerals. Families across your region depend on your presence for these sacred moments. Temples like those at Varanasi, one of Hinduism's holiest cities, draw pilgrims from enormous distances. You might spend your entire career serving there, along the sacred Ganges River, guiding cremation rituals believed to release souls from endless rebirth. However, your privileged caste position creates resentment. Lower castes are historically barred from entering certain temples or reciting sacred texts themselves. That inequality eventually sparks major social reform movements, challenging your religious authority directly. Meanwhile, your income depends heavily on donations from worshippers and wealthy patrons. During famines or political instability, temple support can collapse, leaving priests suddenly poor despite their high social status. Even worse, invasions repeatedly threaten your temples. Various rulers across history destroy or loot major Hindu temples during conquests, stealing treasures accumulated over centuries and forcing religious practices temporarily underground in certain regions. Buddhist monk. Becoming a Buddhist monk works differently from almost every religion so far. You are not born into it. You choose it, or your family chooses it for you as a child. Wealth and caste supposedly do not matter. Monasteries accept anyone willing to follow strict discipline. Once you join, you give up nearly everything. No personal property beyond simple robes and a begging bowl. No permanent home in many traditions. No marriage, no romantic relationships, no personal wealth whatsoever. Your entire identity shifts toward simplicity and discipline. Your day starts extremely early, often before sunrise. You meditate for hours, seeking calm and awareness rather than emotional excitement. You walk through villages each morning, silently collecting food donations in your bowl, since monks traditionally cannot grow or buy their own food. You study Buddhist scripture constantly, following rules originally taught by Siddhartha Gautama, the historical Buddha. Monasteries like those at Nalanda in India became massive centers of learning, attracting thousands of students from across Asia. However, monastic discipline is exhausting. Some traditions require over 200 separate rules governing behavior, speech, and even how you fold your robes. Breaking major rules can mean expulsion from monastic life entirely. Meanwhile, political persecution repeatedly threatens Buddhism across history. Certain Chinese emperors, during periods of religious suppression, forcibly closed monasteries and forced monks back into ordinary life. Thousands of monks lose their entire way of life through single royal decrees. Even worse, physical hardship never really ends. Long meditation sessions cause serious physical pain. Strict fasting weakens your body. Traveling barefoot between distant monasteries exposes you to disease, exhaustion, and dangerous terrain across mountains and jungles. Protestant priest and pastor. After Martin Luther challenges the Catholic Church in 1517, your entire religious world splits apart. If you become a Protestant pastor, your life looks completely different from a medieval Catholic priest. You can marry. You can have children. Your role centers on preaching scripture, not performing elaborate ceremonies. You study the Bible directly, often reading it in your own local language for the first time,
thanks to the newly invented printing press. You believe people can reach God without needing a priest as a middleman. That idea alone makes you dangerously controversial to established Catholic authorities. Your congregation expects long, detailed sermons every Sunday. You spend hours during the week studying scripture, writing sermons, and visiting sick or struggling families. Unlike Catholic priests, you also manage a household, balancing family responsibilities alongside religious duties. However, choosing this path during the Reformation is genuinely dangerous. Catholic authorities in many regions consider you a heretic. Priests and pastors get imprisoned, exiled, or executed depending on which ruler controls your territory at any given moment. Meanwhile, Protestant groups themselves splinter into competing branches almost immediately. Lutherans, Calvinists, and Anabaptists disagree fiercely over doctrine. Religious wars break out across
Europe, including the devastating 30 Years' War, killing millions and destroying entire regions. Even worse, your income depends entirely on your congregation, not a wealthy central church. Poor harvests or economic hardship in your community means your own family struggles too. There is no guaranteed safety net protecting you. Eventually, though, your model spreads worldwide through colonization and missionary work, permanently reshaping global Christianity into the diverse religious landscape recognized today. Across every civilization, priesthood always promised respect, purpose, and closeness to something greater than yourself. However, that promise always came with a price. Endless rituals, political danger, poverty, disease, persecution, and the constant fear of failing both rulers and gods followed every single one of these roles throughout history. Whether you served pharaohs, emperors, caliphs, or congregations, the weight of responsibility never truly disappeared.